Sometimes life seems to move faster than our own steps, and when we realize we are already far from the place where our soul breathes calmly. Imagine why an instant when you are in front of a silent lake at dawn. The surface of water reflects the sky, but a single restless thought is enough to transform this mirror in ripples. This is also what happens within us. The mind moves, and the soul loses your image needs. There are days when we feel that something essential has moved away. We don't know exactly what. We only notice a subtle misalignment, as if the wind was blowing in the opposite direction, our chest. And then the question arises that echoes, even without a voice. How to align the soul and the mind to live with purpose, without effort, without violence against ourselves. The path is not a grand quest, nor is it a leap into the unknown. It's a return to what exists at the bottom of the lake, behind the waves, in the silence of morning, before the world demands us to rush. There is a spark that calls us to close, a breeze that doesn't command, it just invites. When we stop for a brief moment and listen to this call, we realize that the dishevelment is not a fault. It is a message. It's the soul saying that it has moved away a little, waiting let the mind follow it, and when both go together, the purpose does not need to be sought after. It blossoms naturally, like a sprout that finally finds the right soil. If you feel like there's an invisible thread, trying to bring your parts together, if you sense that something subtle wants to guide you to a more serene place, this video is for you. Allow yourself to follow with me as far as the wind touches that which we do not yet understand, but deeply we recognize. Breathe. The lake is quiet again, and the path starts right here. When we observe life around us, we realize that everything moves in rhythms that they do not depend on our will. The light spreads slowly. The wind changes direction when you want. Water always finds a way, even between the smallest stones resistant. But we humans often forget this natural flow. We pass the days trying to fit our steps into a rhythm that is not born from within. And then the mind advances, runs, insists, while the soul remains where everything is still smooth. This distance creates a silent void, a space where purpose is lost. Even so, the world keeps calling us to get back on track. There is a disconnect that arises when we live solely on the strength of thought. A mind with its labyrinths tries to control what does not always need to be controlled. It creates barriers, rigid expectations, hastily drawn maps. The soul, however, is like the light wind that glides across the surface of the leaves. It does not force, it does not demand, it only expressed naturally. When we turn away from his voice, we feel a weight that cannot be we know how to name. It looks like tiredness, but it's just misalignment. The soul moves in smooth spirals, the mind in straight lines. And living with purpose is allowing both find a common thread, a possible dance between your differences. Imagine yourself walking through an ancient forest. Trees don't argue among themselves which one it must bloom first. The water doesn't question where it should flow. The sun does not calculate how much light to shed on each stone. Everything just happens. And when that happens, everything fulfills its purpose. When we bring this look inside, we realize that our life becomes heavy precisely when we try to force what should just be blossom. Purpose is not a distant goal. It is a way of existing. It's the vibration that arises when mind and soul rest in the same breath. Just like trees, no, we need to decide each direction. We just need to listen where there is already a calling. In current times, we live like those running along unknown trails, believing that speed is a sign of direction. But it's not. A river never rushes, and yet reaches the sea. Maybe that's why when we finally stop, we realize that there were signs everywhere. The tiredness that insisted, the dissatisfaction that returned like an echo, a feeling that something essential was being lost. These signs do not herald weakness, announce return, and the return is always smooth, almost invisible. It starts when the mind finally bows to the rhythm of the soul, allowing itself to rest in the place where everything does meaning without needing explanation. Inner harmony is not born from effort, but from listening, a deep listening, which will beyond words and is anchored in what we feel when touching our own existence. A moment ago, where a simple breath of wind reveals more to us than entire days of thoughts accelerated. The soul speaks through small things, the luminosity that changes at the end of afternoon, the distant smell of rain, the sudden silence of a cold morning. These signs, they seem fragile, but they retain enough strength to align what is scattered. When we allow ourselves to notice these discrete messages, we discover that we are not lost, only distant for a brief moment. And then comes the beginning of the journey, a beginning that does not require major decisions or ruptures dramatic, just an internal movement like the first light that appears before the dawn. The mind starts to slow down, the soul begins to approach, and between both, a new space is born, a fertile field where purpose can grow, not how obligation, but as a matter of course. It's like your whole life is waiting to be lived in this way, with lightness, with presence, with the serenity of someone who finally realized that you don't need to chase anything. Just walk with what already exists inside. When we look at nature with true attention, we realize that each element finds its place effortlessly. Mountains exist as silent presences. The wind whispers without needing to prove its strength. The water follows its course with purity and softness. Nothing about them is out of alignment. And yet, we, who are also part from this same fabric, we create tensions that do not belong to our being. Between what we feel and what we think, often a thin layer of noise appears, like fog that covers a valley at dawn. But the fog doesn't last forever. It dissolves when the sun returns. The same happens when the soul illuminates the mind again. Inner harmony does not depend on dominating the world, but on understanding one's own self. Internal movement. There are days when we carry thoughts that weigh like logs soggy, others in which delicate sensations go unnoticed because the mind run ahead. The soul, however, remains sensitive to details. It listens to the change of light, recognizes the moments of silence, notices the small fissures that appear in the everyday. When we align ourselves with this deep feeling, we realize that what we call chaos is just the turbulent surface of water that, deep down, is always calm, and it is in this depth that the truest purpose lives. In the modern scenario, we live surrounded by stimuli that take us away from the natural state of presence. Haste has become a second skin, comparison has become a habit, and the search incessantly searching for the best, a labyrinth with no clear exit. But when we observe a field open, we realize that no flower tries to surpass the other, no tree disputes who reaches the sun first. They all grow at their own pace, and that is precisely why they make up a harmonious landscape. Maybe the soul tries to remind us of this when we feel too tired. Purpose is not born from comparison, but from authenticity. The mind alone finds peace when he stops competing with the world and begins to dialogue with himself heart. From the moment we recognize this difference between what is imposed and what is essential, something in us begins to give way. It's like the sound of wind passing through a door half open, soft but transformative. The soul does not scream, does not demand. It just indicates the path where breathing becomes lighter. And by following it, we realize that the world exterior responds. Relationships soften, choices become clearer, time seems to slow down, reorganize around our internal posture. The mind, previously scattered, finds a line more serene. And from this serenity comes a profound understanding. We are not separated from the world. We are an echo of it. When we understand that the world outside reflects the world inside, we can walk with more care and reverence. If the mind is filled with agitation, the day will seem arduous. If the soul is hidden, even the beautiful will seem distant. But when they both get closer, everyday life gains luminosity. Simple things, the sound of water, the touch of the breeze, the slowly moving shadow, become reminders that there is an invisible thread connecting everything. This thread does not require strength, just attention. And the more we notice your presence, the more we realize that living with purpose is first of all learning to see what has always been before us. And then a silent truth emerges. Harmony is not the absence of challenges, but the ability to remain whole even when the world changes around us. So like bamboo that bends in the wind without breaking, the soul adapts to circumstances without losing its essence. The mind, when it learns to follow it, becomes more flexible, wiser, less anxious. And in this union, we find a possible path, a path where purpose reveals itself little by little like a stream that shows its course as we progress. The outer life adjusts when the inner life aligns, and everything it starts with a simple gesture, allowing yourself to listen. There is a point within us where everything becomes still, even when the world around us becomes quiet, moves like a great whirlwind. This point has no form, no defined voice, no is in a hurry. He just watches. It's like the silent space between two sounds, like the pause that precedes, the breeze that crosses a mountain. When we get closer from this inner place, we realize that the mind stops being a rigid force that tries to control each direction and become just as a visitor. The soul, in turn, reveals itself as the host of a territory that has always been its own. It is there that the life gains depth. As we go through our days, we often forget about this center. We wake up already involved in the tasks, the emergencies, the expectations we carry, or that are imposed on us. The mind jumps from thought to thought like a bird restless, trying to predict what hasn't happened yet. But the spirit that watches continues there, immutable, waiting for us to return. He doesn't push, he doesn't call hard, just holds a silent field where we can rest when we decide to stop fighting against the natural flow of life. And when we finally stop, something changes. Little by little, we began to see with a look that doesn't judge, just recognizes. We realize that many of the pains we carry born of rigid expectations, of unnecessary comparisons, of attempts to be who we are not. This realization is like the sun emerging from behind a thick fog. Everything remains the same, but now we can see. The soul has always known the way, was the mind that, lost in noise, turned away from him. The spirit that observes reminds us that we are not what we think, but what remains when thoughts are dissolved. In this inner space, we come into contact with a clarity that does not depend of effort. It's like diving into deep waters where the sound of the world doesn't reach us. There, every sensation is clearer, every intention purer, every breath more true. And the longer we remain in this state of serene observation, the more we realize that purpose does not need to be found. It reveals itself naturally when we stop the excess of thoughts that cover it up. Modern life convinces us that we need to act all the time, as if we were in constant debt to the world. But within this silent space, we understand that action without inner direction is just dispersion. When the mind aligns itself with the observing spirit, action becomes precise, smooth, essential. Nothing is wasted, nothing is forced. The path turns out to be a step at a time, and it is precisely there, in this encounter between depth and simplicity, that we realize the essence of alignment, living not as someone trying to prove something, but like someone who finally remembers who they are. From that point on, everything breathes from another mode. Walking with purpose does not mean choosing a rigid destination, but recognizing the movement that already vibrates within us. Just as a river does not need to announce its path to move forward, the soul also does not need to justify the direction it wants to take. It just flows. The mind, however, accustomed to seeking certainty, tries to define goals, plot routes, anticipate each curve before you even start walking. And it is in this effort that we got lost. For purpose is not born of anticipation, comes from listening. Surge like the soft light that touches the surface of the water before the sun fully rises. No, the moment we feel this inner light, something aligns without us having to force it. The life modern, full of urgencies, tries to convince us that purpose is a trophy, something to be achieved with commitment, discipline, and comparison. But when we look at nature, we realize that the purpose is less in the result and more in the silent movement that precedes each transformation. The tree does not grow because it decided to be big. She grows because he responded to the light. The river does not move because it wants to reach the sea. It moves because this is your way of existing. Likewise, our purpose does not arise from an idea grandiose, but with a subtle inclination, a feeling that a certain path brings lightness while others bring tiredness. It is this silent difference that points the direction true. When the mind finally bows to this wisdom of the soul, everything around begins to reorganize. Choices stop being obstacles and become steps natural. The body breathes more smoothly. The heart finds rhythm, and life seems less of a race and more of a deployment. In this state, we no longer seek to be guided by external expectations. we follow what comes from within. And when this awakened perception, something deep opens, as if an invisible door were opened, unlocked, allowing us to walk with more confidence. Not because we know where everything will work out, but because we feel that we are aligned with a course greater than ourselves. If, as you listen to these words, something resonates inside you, perhaps it is a sign that the soul is already calling the mind closer. And if that feeling is arising now, allow yourself to recognize it is possible that something inside you has already awakened. Purpose does not need to be found in the outside world, because it has never been outside. It's like a trickle of water that runs from the beginning of life, just waiting for let us notice your presence. When we finally walk beside that thread, there is no more anxiety, just a continuous and natural movement, like the breeze sliding between the sheets. So, step by step, we discover that living with purpose does not require ready answers. It requires presence. It demands softness. It requires confidence in the pace we has always called. There are times when life becomes heavy, not because something external oppresses us, but because we accumulate within ourselves invisible layers of tension, expectations, memories that have already fulfilled their role, and yet we insist on carrying them. It's like walking through a valley shrouded in thick mist. Nothing around is really obscure, but the view is narrow and the path seems further away than it really is. When we allow the soul breathe again, the fog begins to disperse. Clarity does not come from one time. It insinuates itself, like a beam of light piercing the morning silence. It's in this instant that we understand the power of inner purification. It is not erasing the past, but release what has become weight. The mind, accustomed to accumulating, struggles to maintain old structures such as dry branches that resist the wind. The soul, however, moves like water, dissolving what has already lost meaning. And when we let that water run through our thoughts, something softens. The internal rigidities begin to give way, and a lighter space emerges between what we think and what we really are. We live in a world that teaches us to add up achievements, add up desires, add up responsibilities. But clarity is not born from summation, born from space. It's at halftime between one thought and another we discover a spark of freedom, a breath which does not depend on circumstances. Just like the wind that passes through an open window, this freedom enters when we leave enough space for it to manifest. And when you enter, you realize that purification is not a grand ritual. It is an intimate gesture, almost imperceptible, which begins with the decision to let go. Release the rush, release the comparison, let go of the fear of not living up to what we imagine others wait. Every time we let go of something we no longer need, the soul lifts itself up a notch, a little lighter. And this lightness is the raw material of clarity. It is not about the absence of problems, but with a cleaner, more lucid perception, which allows us to cross the challenges without getting lost in them. Just as rain purifies the air and reveals aromas hidden in the earth, inner purification reveals nuances of life that were not previously we realized. The distant song of a bird, the texture of the wind, the change of temperature at dusk. Everything becomes more vivid, more present, more real. And in this state, we begin to understand that clarity is not a goal, but a return to our essence. When the mind gets rid of excess, it approaches the soul with naturalness. And in this approach, a deep sense of alignment arises, as if we had finally found the center of a circle we've been drawing our whole lives without realizing it. Purification is therefore an invitation to simplicity, an invitation to recognize that living well is not about accumulating light, but about removing the shadows that prevent she manifests herself. There is a moment in life when we feel that two forces within us begin finally moving in the same direction. It is not a grand event or an obvious glare. It's more like the moment the sky changes color before the sun comes out. Nothing has yet been fully revealed, but everything has already begun. The mind, which so many times she ran alone, she slows down. The soul, which so often waited in silence, advances. Both meet in the invisible center of the chest, where the rhythm adjusts, where the breathing gains depth, where a subtle thread connects what was previously dispersed. This union is not a rational pact. It is a recognition, When the mind perceives the softness with which the soul touches the world, it understands that it no longer needs to fight against herself. And when the soul feels that the mind is finally following it, it expands like a breeze crossing an open field. In this meeting, something is born new, an integral conscience, capable of positioning itself in the face of life with firmness and delicacy at the same time. It's like going through an invisible portal. On one side, there are excess thoughts, fear of making mistakes, accumulated tension. On the other, a clarity that does not depend on explanation. We walk more lightly because we let of carrying the weight of constant doubt. We realize that the purpose, when aligned with the that we are, does not require proof, just presence. The union between mind and soul transforms the way we see everyday life. Small tasks are no longer obstacles, and they become expressions of care. Relationships gain depth, not because of great gestures, but for the authenticity that becomes possible when we are whole. Until silence changes, it stops being the absence of sound and becomes a home, shelter, fertile ground where the spirit rests. It is in this state that we discover that we do not walk alone. There is something subtle that accompanies us, an ancient breath that has always guided us, but that only we can hear go when we stop chasing the future. This presence is not imposed. It only manifests when we are aligned within. She appears in the glow unexpected of a peaceful afternoon, in the delicate movement of the clouds, in the invitation silent from a wind that changes direction without warning. As this union strengthens, we become more aware that our choices are not just decisions mental, but responses to that deep call that vibrates within the soul. Life then takes on real flavor. We do not rush, but we move forward. We don't stick to past, but we recognize its role. We do not fear the unknown, because we feel that there is something greater supporting each step. The union between mind and soul does not eliminate our imperfections. It simply lights the way so we can cross them with dignity, serenity, and confidence. When this happens, we discover that everything around us, light, wind, water, memory, is conspiring to remind us of who we are when we finally return to our center. There is a moment when the path stops being something we seek and becomes something we rests beneath our feet. This is when the mind, previously restless, meets the soul again, and this reunion creates a silent vibration, like the last glow of the day before the night wrap everything gently. Life breathes in us, as if it had always waited for us this alignment. Nothing needs to be rushed. Nothing needs to be explained. It just is. When we notice this change, we feel that the world around us is also changing, transforms. The shadows become less dense. The wind seems to carry messages that before we didn't notice, and even the silence starts to shine like an invisible temple where the spirit rests. In this state, understanding purpose ceases to be an effort, intellectual, and becomes a natural gesture. He appears like water flowing between stones, discreet but insistent, reminding us that everything flows when we stop resisting. And so, at the end of this journey, we realize that aligning soul and mind is not a destination, but a way of walking. It is the lightness that emerges when we let go of the weights that we cannot belong to us. It is the clarity that arises when we accept that the invisible also guides, supports, and guides. It's the silent smile that comes when we recognize that we are alone. We never have been. If this path touched something inside you, sign up and continue walking with us. There are many steps yet to be taken, many interior landscapes yet to be revealed, many subtle whispers waiting to be heard. The spiritual journey does not end. She goes deeper. And before we close, I leave you with one last question, not to be answered now, but to echo within you until the right moment reveals its truth. What if what we call destiny is just the whisper of the kami who give us, have they been with you since birth?